2, 1. Okay, so welcome to tonight's rather exciting webinar for the future of Radcliffe. We are, of course, discussing the strategic regeneration framework, which may not sound exciting, but is very exciting. And so we're really pleased to be able to share with residents across Radcliffe and anyone else outside of Radcliffe who's interested some of our updates on this plan. Which I'm sure many of you will be very interested to see. So let me first of all just say a big thank you to everybody who is tuning in, everybody that has been working hard on this plan to really actually get it up and running and start to deliver on it. A big thank you to everybody who's been working on this webinar and getting it ready, because we know it's really important actually that we continue to share as much as possible and keep that engagement with local residents so that you have the confidence that what we say we're hoping to do, we're actually able to do and deliver on. I'll just start by giving a quick round of introductions for those who have joined us on this webinar and will be speaking tonight and also answering the many questions that have come in and will continue to come in throughout the evening. If you do have questions, you can submit them. We will be taking a combination of pre-submitted and live questions. So, make sure if you've got a question, you put it in. And of course, if we don't manage to answer every single question, we'll take them away and publish them on the Bury Council website as a sort of FAQ style list. And we'll make sure to get you answers to that as soon as possible. So, I'll introduce myself officially. I am Councillor Eamon O'Brien, the leader of Bury Council, and I'll be sort of chairing the meeting tonight. I'm chairing it in place of Councillor Rhys Cathcart, who sadly is not able to join us this evening. His father died earlier this week, and I think all of our thoughts are with Rhys at this difficult time. His dad was a resident of Radcliffe for over 20 years and taught in Radcliffe. And I know he was very passionate about Radcliffe, as Councillor Cathcart is. So we keep him in our thoughts this evening. We're also attempting, although I'm not sure we will be able to get the vice chair, which is Councillor Mike Smith, who has found it a little bit difficult to get onto the webinar tonight. So if he can join, we will try and get him. If not, I'm sure he will be watching and contributing, but we thank him for the work he's doing as well. The panel, so to speak, who are with us on the call. First off, let me introduce Simon Bedford. So if Simon's there, I might want to say hello.
Good evening, Leader, and thank you very much. My name's Simon Bedford, and I've been pleased to be working with the Bury Council team now for around 12 months on the Strategic Regeneration Framework, and pleased to be joining you this evening.
Thank you very much, Simon. The next I'll introduce is Chris Logue. Chris.
Good evening. Thanks, Chair. I'm Chris Logue, Assistant Director of Strategy, Planning and Regulation, and I've been heavily involved in the production of the Strategic Regeneration Framework, and will be involved in taking it forward through the implementation stages.
Thank you, Chris. We're also joined by David Lynch. David.
Hello, my name's David Lynch. I'm the Assistant Director for Regeneration at Bury Council. My role in the context of Radcliffe is to translate the planning and the master planning policies into tangible regeneration projects.
That's great. And David is relatively new to the team, so we hope he is excited as much by the planning as those of us who've been with it from the start. So we really welcome David and the work he's doing. The next is Paul Cook. Paul.
Yes, good evening, Paul Cook. I'm the strategic lead for education services, and my focus is on the new school for Radcliffe. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I'm sure lots of interest in that. I know we've had lots of questions about it, so I'm sure we'll be coming to you later. We also have Karen Johnston. Karen.
Good evening. I'm Karen Johnston. I'm the Head of Communications for the Council and the CCG, here this evening to help facilitate the question and answer session.
Excellent. And last but by no means least, we have Liz Gillen with us tonight. So Liz.
Yes, good evening everybody. I'm Liz Gillen. I'm the Unit Manager in the Town Centres and Strategic Sites team. As with Crispy and Logue, I've been heavily involved in the production of the Strategic Regeneration Framework and part of and supporting the delivery team now. And I'll be working with Karen to facilitate the question and answers tonight. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Liz. So before we jump into the presentation, which will, I think, Simon, we've given you half an hour, so you know there's lots to update on, but Simon will run through the latest on all of the plan, where we're up to, a bit of a refresh about where it started, but importantly about the progress we're making and where we see things going. Then we're going to give most of the time tonight over to a question and answer session, and as I say, some questions have come in before. We'll take some of them. Some will continue to come in throughout the evening. We'll make sure to take as many of them as we can, and then we will close the meeting at 7:30. So I'll only take just a minute just to give a brief introduction to this, because it is an incredibly important piece of work, and as I say, it genuinely is an exciting time for Radcliffe. There's no doubt about it. The challenges we're all facing at the moment have, I think, stretched us to our limit. Many people are, you know, frustrated at being stuck inside and the lockdown, but I think actually many people are now a lot more hopeful about the vaccine rollout, about lifting of restrictions in the safest possible way, but also as quickly as possible, and that focus about getting us back to recovery, you know, so we can actually start to talk about how we actually build back better and how we build back in places like Radcliffe, not just in terms of a recovery, but into that much wider piece of regeneration. One of the challenges and one of the many questions we get as a council from residents is, we've heard a lot of talk about this before. We've seen a lot of ambition and vision. Where's the delivery side? What are you actually going to do, and why is this different? And that is a really great challenge, because none of this will happen without the right people, without the money in place, without the right partnerships. This is a really big project, and it will take many, many years to really fulfill our entire ambition. But what can we be doing here and now to really give you that confidence that this is a really big priority and something we are genuine about delivering on? And I hope the presentation will give you a flavour of that. Will help you to actually say things are improving. Radcliffe is on the up, and there's a lot in this plan that I hope will give you that confidence. It's really important as well that we don't forget that regeneration has to be more than just buildings and places. It really has to be about people as much as it is about places. We know it's the people in Radcliffe that make it special. The buildings, of course, are clearly part of that, and we're going to talk a lot about that tonight. But it's also really important we take a wide view on what makes a place a great place to live in. And of course, it's the people, it's the community, it's the spaces that people gather and use, and the inventiveness and ideas of people. We want to try and capture that in this plan as much as the talk about structures and planning permissions and practical issues like parking and transport. So all of that is going to try and come together in this presentation tonight. And so, without further ado, I will hand over now to Simon, who's going to take us through that presentation. As I say, we've put aside about half an hour because there's a lot to talk about, and then we will go into those questions. So if anything does come up, please do make use of that chat facility. Okay, Simon.
Thank you very much. And without further ado, let's get on with the update of what is, as you say, Leader, a really exciting, I think, project that is now shaping up in Radcliffe. I'm ably assisted by somebody who's going to move through the slides for me this evening, so that we can keep things flowing. And please, if you've got your questions, as the leader said, then please let us have those, and we'll deal with them in due course. Okay, so importantly, and I think the leader just touched on this in his remarks, this regeneration project isn't about buildings. They are only the fabric within which people, the people of Radcliffe, will spend some time over the next few years. And that to me is a very important point, because sometimes we can get a bit lost in the what's it going to look like. That's fine, but it's actually what are we going to do? How are we going to use the town centre as we look forward? And that's what hopefully we'll be able to talk to you a little bit more about this evening. Towns, they are, aren't they? They are the heartbeat of our community. The town centre is the place where people look to for their, for sort of civic uses, for things to do, for places to go work and to spend time. I think we'd all recognise that Radcliffe isn't quite what it should be nowadays, and it's important that this current wave of activity gets Radcliffe into the great shape that we want it to be, and is a great place for people of Radcliffe particularly, but other people who want to come to the town as well, to enjoy and to spend more time in. That's why this framework's been commissioned. It was adopted, if you remember, and people have been through a public consultation previously in September, and since then an awful lot of work has been undertaken to get things moving, and I'm going to take you through some of that work this evening. What does the Strategic Regeneration Framework do? It pulls all the bits together, pulls all the bits of activity together into one place, so that we can all understand exactly how all the different moving parts of the town and the wider area work together. And that's something that we hope will make sure that each step as we take it, makes sense. It's the right thing to do, and it advances the vision for the town centre, which is to make it a great place to be. If we can go to the next slide. I was certainly involved in the consultation process that we went through late last summer, and we did it all online, didn't we? 200 people joined us, I think, from memory, the last time round, which was great to have that, and wasn't in person, but it was all we all managed to achieve it virtually. I suspect a few of us were hoping we would be back in person by now, but it isn't to be. Hopefully that will change over the next few months or so. But there has been a lot of discussion, a lot of consultation. I hope you have been part of that. We've had a consultation webpage. We've tried very hard to reach out to all members of the community through leaflets, press releases, press features, social media, of course. Virtual consultation meetings where we've been able to achieve them, and actually we got over 2,000 visits to our online consultation page. Over 300 questionnaires were completed, and we generated 1,400 comments on the original draft of the Strategic Regeneration Framework. So lots of engagement, lots of interest, and whatever I've been in Radcliffe, I've found that people are genuinely very, very interested in this topic, and that's to be something we need to nurture and make sure we continue with. And hopefully everybody feels that they can both challenge some of the things that they don't necessarily see as being the right things to do, but also support those things that they do, and that's the way it should be, I think. Can we go to the next slide, please? We did listen. It's important to make this point that when we consulted on the SRF, as we call it, in 2020, a number of comments were made around some of the ideas, some of the approaches that had been suggested, and we changed it. We made some changes to the document to make sure that it responded to what the community was saying about some of the ideas that have been suggested. We'll talk about the school in a little while, and I'm sure Paul will spend time on it in the Q&A later, but it is a hugely important part of what happens in Radcliffe. And the great news that we've had, which we'll touch on shortly, around the fact that we will be getting that secondary school into Radcliffe. You said, and we agreed, that it should actually form a component part of the plan, and it does. We talked about car parking quite a lot. It's an emotive topic. We know that there are quite a lot of cars in Radcliffe Town Centre one way or another. Some of them are yours, some of them are the local, owned by the community and used by the community. Some aren't. some come from other places, park in the town, and potentially for reasons such as using Metrolink as an example. We suggested perhaps putting an additional car parking deck on the Asda car park, but you said you weren't too sure about that and whether that was a great idea, and we dropped it as an idea, and it's not in the plan. It isn't in the plan, and we will need to find other solutions to car parking as we go forward. We talked about transport and the need for a new transportation strategy. There will be one. It's a work in progress, and I'll touch on it a little later. And you said that there should be a wider thought process, a wider set of ideas brought forward around Blackburn Street. You will know that Blackburn Street is a really important street in Radcliffe. It links the core of the town centre back in and north towards Whittaker Street and beyond. And it's it's an important street in the town. There's a site at we call it Blackburn Street Gateway, and that site deserves and should have a new set of uses for it, and we'll touch on that as we go through this evening. We at the time were wondering about what to do with the Royal Mail. We've left it as it is for now because actually it's an important part of the fabric of the town. It may in the longer term be something to look at, but it's not for now. We've just left it as it is, and that's, I'm sure, the right thing. And we have, having listened to the comments made by the community, thought about enhancements to the bus interchange rather than necessarily reconfiguration, and that's the way we're going to go. And we have strengthened very much the approach to things like design and quality and issues around sustainability, and we're all very clear now, I think, aren't we, that the road to net zero, or as people call it, and a carbon neutral world should apply here as much as it would anywhere else, and that's embedded very much within our plans. And I'll again touch on some good news in that context in a few minutes. Next slide, please. Over the last few months, recognising the amount of change that we wanted to bring about in the town centre and the ambitions that the plan has. It is an ambitious plan. It looks to do many, many different things, but you can't do that unless you put in place good structures and good management approaches to make sure that everything works properly, and that requires resources. The council didn't have a dedicated resource in Radcliffe. It does now. It's set up a project management office for the Radcliffe project. David is here representing that team this evening, and inside of the council we've set up a number of different groups to help drive the project forward. The Radcliffe Regeneration Advisory Group is a broader constituent, involves members of the community who have been brought together to help provide advice and give some input to the projects as they move forward. A delivery board specifically set up to oversee all of the work and all the projects that are being recommended in Radcliffe, and that delivery board scrutinises and challenges the work that particularly the officers of the council are doing. A special cabinet committee that is actually established solely to oversee the work that we're suggesting, and then of course the council's own cabinet, which is ultimately, as we all know, there to approve or not approve projects and programmes that are suggested. So that's all there, that's all in place now, and that's all beginning to work, and you'll see that it's beginning to do quite a bit of business. Next slide, please. So just a reminder for those of you on the webinar this evening who perhaps haven't seen this before, but for many of you who will have done, there are, and we said there would be, some sort of initial moves that we wanted to make in terms of bringing the strategic regeneration framework to life, some priority projects that would really begin to change the face at Radcliffe. These are not the only things that are in the document that we've prepared, and I really would want to emphasise that there are lots of other projects within the programme, and they will be brought forward in time, including things like reopening, or opening up the river and the country parks, the canal, and making sure that the sort of the networks around the town are more accessible to the community, walking, cycling, what we call a green and blue environment to live in. That will all come. It's not necessarily easy to see that in this diagram, but that is all there. In this diagram, what we see is the cluster of strategic projects that we're particularly focused on right now to make sure that we get that change programme underway. At the heart of the town centre, a new Radcliffe hub, a new civic space and set of buildings. I'll touch on those in a bit more detail in a moment. The reuse of Market Chambers, a great building on the corner of Bridge Street there. And then two what we call, if you like, bookends to the town, two large sites that are being brought forward for new housing, brownfield sites that can be reused for housing purposes, the old School Street site and the East Lancs paper mill, between them delivering several hundred new homes over the next few years. And then, of course, the secondary school just to the north of the town centre, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. And they are the sort of the main priority projects that we're focused on right now. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes telling you how we're getting on with those. Next slide, please. So where do we start? Well, we start in the hub. The SRF said that this was an opportunity to create a new heart for the town centre. It does include, for the redevelopment of the two existing 1960s shopping blocks that we're all very familiar with, front onto the piazza, around Blackburn Street and Dale Street. We were very clear around that. We said that they actually were not fit for purpose anymore, and it was important that there was a change brought about right at the heart of the town centre that included the redevelopment of those buildings. But you can't just sort of say you're going to do that and then not think about what you're going to do with the buildings. And over the last few months, we've really been working very hard to say, well, what goes into this space? And we now know, or we think that this is the sort of right cocktail of uses, if you like, that we are going to bring forward in the hub area. It will include council services. So that civic heart that some people have said Radcliffe lacks will be back. It will be there. There will be a place to go that will have a council front door attached to it. And there'll be some people from the council working in this space. But in addition, there'll be more space for other people to use such that they can occupy the space and create jobs in the town centre. New workspace available for people to use. There'll be some community space. They will be, because it's important that we don't lose the ground floor of our town centre, there will be some retail, food, beverage, if you like, leisure uses that will sit in the ground floor areas. Some really exciting ideas coming forward in that context, and we are exploring what other leisure facilities we could bring to the hub to really make it a multiple sort of multi-use environment right at the heart of the town centre. Our master plans in preparation, design options are being thought through, and we're beginning to look at costs, and that work is all well underway. Next slide, please. So, having thought about the hub, and we can take some questions around the hub in Q&A, what have we said about Market Chambers and where are we with Market Chambers? Well, it's been vacant, as people will know, for quite a few years. It was previously used as office space, and it's going to be brought back into a work use. The revamp project will be realigned such that it sort of sits within the town centre. We've got some early design work underway. We will bring back into use the ground floor, and there will be some sort of 2 units there that can be let for commercial purposes. Importantly, we've secured some funding to help with that project from Greater Manchester's what they call decarbonisation fund. So we've been successful already in securing funding to help with that project, and we would expect that scheme to be well underway within the next few months, such that we begin to make real and material progress with bringing that building back into use. A really exciting project, and we're making great progress to bring that to life. It, of course, sits next to the market, a really important part of the fabric of the town centre, and we are exploring ways of linking the market to the Market Chambers such that that can all work really well together. And that is some work that's underway at the moment. Next slide, please. On the housing front, and as I said in a few remarks a few minutes ago, we've got these two very large-scale housing schemes that we want to bring forward over the next few years. What we said in the SRF was that there was a real opportunity alongside some of the commercial reuses that we were bringing forward in the town to make sure that the housing offer continued to strengthen. Radcliffe's a great place to live, I'm sure. And there are more opportunities to bring more homes into the core of the town centre, and indeed to use sites that are, have been out of use for a while and bring them back into a purposeful use. The great thing about the East Lancs paper mill site and the School Street site is that we get circa 500 homes coming forward on those two sites over the next few years. But also, what it does is it regenerates those brownfield sites. It brings them back into use, and it creates this great environment for people to live in. There are other opportunities for new homes in the town centre, and once we've done these, we should get on with some more, and it all adds to the vibrancy of the town, brings some glue, I would say, to the other bits, the other parts of the strategy. It makes we get homes for people to live in, or affordable homes as well. This isn't about just producing homes for people to buy in the market. There will be affordable homes here, and there will be a real mix of possibilities for people to live in. Already secured nearly £1 million from Greater Manchester's brownfield land fund, so-called, for the School Street site. That's also secured quite recently. Homes England, the National Homes Agency, is helping with further monies to support the council in some of the work that they need to do, and planning applications and enabling works, particularly on the School Street site, now in underway, and we expect the East Lancs paper mill to follow very shortly. So real progress being made on housing, and more to come, I would say. This is only the start. Next slide, please. Touching on the high school, clearly this has been a topic of some conversation for some time. When we did the public consultation event in September, we were talking about the need for a new secondary school in Radcliffe, and the fact that it was proposed on the former Coney Green High School site. Well, on the 5th of February, Star Academy has received approval from the Department of Education to open a new secondary school in Radcliffe. We're going to get that secondary school back in the town centre that people have said for so long is required. A £15 million investment to meet the needs of the growing population. The secondary school is expected to open in September 2024, so not too far away, and will provide that much needed opportunity for the 11 to 16 age group to go to school in the town centre. So really great news, and I'm sure Paul and others will touch on some of the detail of that later on this evening, but that is another great step forward, and will bring back young people into the town and all that goes with a school environment back into the town centre. So really, really positive news. Next slide, please. We touched on leisure, and clearly, again, what the SRF said was that there should be a permanent leisure centre planned for Radcliffe. It was important to step up from the temporary leisure facilities that are there at the moment and produce something that was fit for purpose and sat within the framework of other investments that are being brought forward. It was important to think about linking new leisure facilities with the secondary school, but also to think about how the leisure facilities could impact our plans for the town centre. So where have we got to on leisure? Well, as yet, we don't have a absolutely preferred location for a new wellness and leisure facility, but we are working through a shortlist. That shortlist includes both the hub, one or two other town centre sites. Blackburn Street would be the obvious example, and also Coney Green. So we're thinking very carefully about how best to place that leisure facility within the context of the wider regeneration plans. How would the leisure facilities address needs and requirements of the community? How can we fit it in? There are things around site constraints and feasibility to take into account. And how would that leisure facility really make a contribution to the wider regeneration play that we have for Radcliffe? We'll be working really carefully over the next few weeks now to confirm a preferred location for that new leisure facility. And I think certainly by the time we come back to a forum like this in the next few weeks and months, we'll be able to say a little more about that. Of course, nothing will be done without the governance structures that we touched on earlier, the cabinet and committees below it, scrutinising what would be the best option for leisure. So you can be assured that nothing will be done without that level of scrutiny and consultation. But leisure, in the way in which it will help bring together some other component parts of our plan, really important, great opportunity, and one that we're going to realise, I hope. Coming towards the conclusion now, but there's a slide to follow this one, please, which I'm sure people will be interested in, which touches on that issue of how does the transportation network adapt to enable us to bring forward some of these new plans. And what we said in the SRF, reminding people, was that the transportation strategy needs to rebalance the relationship between cars and pedestrians and cyclists and people who don't want to drive, frankly. Probably one or two more cars in Radcliffe than we need, one or two being metaphorically the case. How do we suppress demand for car use whilst at the same time making sure that people who want to use their car and need to use their car can? That is the challenge that is in front of us. We're beginning to work through some ideas in that context, making sure that residents are properly protected in terms of parking schemes, looking at a parking strategy that aims to pull longer stay car parking to the periphery of the town centre, meaning that people won't drive in right into the core, park and leave their car there for a long period of time, but recognising that people may want to pop in and out to access services. That should be possible. Short stay car parking is always an important part of a town's centre's DNA, if you like. But then over time, beginning to sort of address that balance and making sure that we've sort of tried to suppress demand for car access and at the same time help bring forward other options, including, revitalising, reusing other networks, particularly the green network that is all around the town centre and is of high quality. What we know from the COVID situation is that there has been quite a bit of disruption. Because of that, it's not been possible just to kind of get a benchmark and a baseline in terms of survey work to enable us to really advance that strategy at the pace we would want to. I'm sure everybody would recognise that it's important that we get the right evidence before we make any plans for change. Once we get back to something perhaps we can call near normal, we'll advance that work. And again, nothing will be done without proper consultation and without proper scrutiny. You can be assured of that. Next slide, please. So this is probably a good place to sort of draw things to a bit of a conclusion, because people always ask this question, don't they? Or they should do, certainly. Where's the money going to come from? You've got some great ideas and some really important projects coming forward. Where is the money going to come from to support this Radcliffe programme? And I think there are two parts of the conversation that we need to have. The first one is to say, inevitably, the public sector in today's world has to take a bit of a lead in bringing forward some of these plans. And you can see already that we've had some success. The Decarbonisation Fund, £1 million, the Brownfield Land Housing Fund, another £1 million. These are significant pieces of money that are coming into Radcliffe to help with this programme. What we've also set up as a council is a fund that the council can use as and when required to support this plan. And there is political support to do that. It won't be used like confetti. I'm sure the leader will be pleased to confirm, but it will be used where we need to use it to get this programme moving. And there will be some things to do for the council over the near term and the council has committed itself to trying to do what it can, even in these difficult times, to help this programme move forward. If it does that, along with some of the other funding that we've touched on, there is a real possibility of securing even more significant funding from government. And people will have perhaps heard the Chancellor last week talking about a levelling up fund in the budget, and that levelling up fund is now available for people to bid for, and we will be making a bid for Radcliffe. I think it's fair to say, as a priority one area. So high priority for investment, real opportunity to make a bid around this programme for levelling up funding to come into Radcliffe, and that will happen. And that will happen by June the 18th. We expect to know the outcome of that bidding process in the early autumn. It will go at some pace. There are other possibilities as well that we're exploring, including something called the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is actually the replacement to the old European Union funding. You remember on the Brexit deal that there was a suggestion that funding would come back into the UK, that money that we previously spent with the European Union, and that's what the UK Shared Prosperity Fund is, and there will be opportunities to bid for funding into that scheme as well. Importantly, we shouldn't just rely on this money. We want to make sure that others can spend their money in Radcliffe too. That might be a local business, that might be a local retailer. That would be brilliant. If it's a bigger investor or funder who wants to help with some of these plans as well, subject to them being committed, I think, to invest in Radcliffe, then they would be welcome as well. So making sure that this money is matched to other people's money is the way to really, if you like, get some extra bang for your buck, and we'll be seeking to do that as we go forward. So I hope through this short presentation you've got a good sense of real momentum in the programme. Lots of activity on these priority projects. They're not the only things that we're seeking to drive forward, but they are the emphasis of the programme at the moment. And over the summer period, we'll really be trying to really get those into a great shape such that we can begin to get some activity going on site, which I'm sure you're all looking forward to. I don't think there's another slide, but if there is, you can catch me out with it. If you want to click on from here. The next steps from here are perhaps for me to hand back to the leader, but really to recognise that there's a lot of work to do, but there's real commitment to getting on with it. So back to you, leader.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Simon. Very well timed as well, which is great. In fact, you've given us 2 extra minutes for questions. Well, we're grateful for that. So I do hope that has given a real flavour of where we now stand on this and the progress that's actually been made in actually less than a year since we were out consulting on this, and at a very difficult time. So it's really great to see from Simon a full update on a lot of these what we might call the sort of short-term priorities in a much longer-term plan, and the success so far, and things like the school, the extra funding, and the vision. I think now that's starting to come together around the town centre and the inner core of Radcliffe. So we've been looking at questions coming in. We've had a few that were submitted before, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Liz to pull out some of the questions, and then I will do my best to ensure they get a full answer from whoever on the panel is probably best to answer that. So I'm going to hand over to Liz, who I think has the first question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And as you say, there has been quite a number of questions pre-submitted, so I'm just going to try and base the questions around themes so that we manage to answer as many questions as possible. So the first question is around education, and that is, will the new school be a new build or a revamp? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Liz. I'll probably suggest that Paul Cook is probably best placed to answer this. I know, Paul, you've been working on this for a number of years now, and obviously I think we're we're very happy to see the success that this application got. Paul, do you want to talk us through what it might look like and what are the kind of next steps in the process?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I will do. You're quite right. We've been working behind the scenes for some significant time around the principle of a new school, where it might be built, the ideal location, and obviously that's then focused in on Spring Lane, working with potential partners, and hence working with Star Academies as a preferred partner, and then working with the DFE to ensure that there was a strong business case, because the whole application process for a free school ends up being a competitive process in that only so many are approved at any one time. And I think the strength of the case that we presented meant that the DFE the Department for Education had a somewhat easier task in judging that application because of the weight of evidence that we produced. And I think quite rightly too, because as everybody I think would attest to, there is a real need for a new secondary school in Radcliffe. So we are where we are now, in that the application from Star Academies has been approved. What that means is that the government has agreed in principle to put funding in place that will enable the construction of a new school building, and for that new school building to then be commissioned and brought into use by Star Academies. Target date for the opening of the new school is September 2024, and initially it will open with a total capacity of 750 pupils, but rising to 1,000 as needs arise, reflecting the fact that the housing growth will pick up over time and therefore create some additional demands. We will be consulting on admission arrangements in the fullness of time, but what we anticipate is, in the first instance, admission will be for Year 7s in September 2024, and the school will grow incrementally over the following years. In terms of how we work towards that, over the coming months, over the summer term, we will be looking to master plan the Spring Lane site to understand how that site might be developed out. There are clearly existing uses, and we've talked about, for example, leisure and where the preferred location may be. So what we need to do is to just understand how we want to use that site and how we would want to configure new buildings on that site, and that will then determine what the design process is then going forward. So over the coming months, determine the extent of the site to be used for the school and any other associated uses, and then a more detailed design process for the building itself. And obviously, as we go through that process, there'll be a process of stakeholder engagement running alongside that, so that we'll be bringing ideas back to the community about what that school physically looks like as it's designed and then built. And obviously, in parallel to that, look at the impact in terms of existing uses. We touched on leisure and the possible different options for locations. And obviously, we also have the Spring Lane School there, our pupil referral unit, and looking at options there in terms of potential to relocate. So very positive, very exciting. Will take some little time to deliver, but what that will enable us to do is to ensure high quality, sustainable design, and the other associated bit is to look at the associated outdoor leisure, which may not necessarily be connected with the indoor leisure facilities, but this is more about the school and its needs. Obviously, it will have sports hall, outdoor playing pitches, potentially 3G pitch, which themselves can be opened up to the community for wider use as well. So all of those aspects will go into the design. Leader?
Thanks very much, Paul. There's been a little follow-up question on the live section, just asking about, obviously the challenges with the previous schooling was around numbers, or began with numbers, and a little bit about how do we know almost we're going to get the numbers. And I know that's actually been really crucial to try and get this bid in and make it strong. So could you maybe just quite briefly just sort of give us an idea of where we stand with that kind of confidence around numbers?
So yeah, certainly more than happy to. Yeah, I mean, this was a key part of the business case that we presented to the Department for Education. They were clearly keen to ensure that there was a sustainable need for school places, and I think what was helpful actually is the council's approach to the strategic regeneration framework, because that showed that wider commitment to Radcliffe as a town. Because one of the other aspects, and Simon touched on it around housing, is the ability to develop brownfield sites and bring forward housing, some quite quickly, but obviously other sites will follow. All of those centred around the Radcliffe area creates that local demand, which helps sustain the demand for provision of the demand for school places in Radcliffe as opposed to other parts of the town. And obviously the issue then for schooling is that there wasn't actually a secondary school serving Radcliffe. So to some extent, there's an absolute synergy between what we were arguing around the economic growth and the skill sets that are necessary for the economic growth of Radcliffe, and the need to deliver a new school, and for the numbers that then flow through in terms of some of the residential development sustaining that. So it was a complementary business case, which I think was very effective in persuading government that there was a real need here, and hence its support for the application.
Excellent, thanks very much for that, Paul. And as you were saying, sort of the next steps now are that master planning of the sites, and I'm sure we can bring that back, you know, for residents to see and engage with and comment on, as you would expect. Okay, Liz, where are we next?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's been 2 or 3 questions in regarding the Civic Hub and the proposals there, and particularly about the location of the hub. So why was the central location chosen for the hub rather than other options such as the School Street site or the Old Bath site? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Liz. So Simon, you touched upon this in your presentation. Do you want to just come back and reinforce, I suppose, why the central part of this is so important to the overall plan?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, there are other options, of course, but ultimately there's a double win here, and bringing something right to the heart of the town centre and bringing it really to life is what we thought we needed to do from a strategic point of view. We said, let's make sure that people, when they come into Radcliffe, they come right into the heart of the town centre and they stay in the heart of the town centre. That's where the shops are, that's where the pubs are, that's where, you know, the other facilities are. Let's make sure that we give them a reason to come in. If we'd gone to another site, Liz, somewhere like School Street or elsewhere, we wouldn't have got that benefit. Additionally, I think most people would recognise that the buildings that are in the heart of the town centre are not those that we would aspire to still be there in a few years' time, 10 years' time, let's say. And this was an opportunity to change that. And that opportunity should be taken. And what we want to put back is something that we feel very proud of. We love, you know, we enjoy, and it should be a great piece of architecture that we bring forward there. So I think there were 2 reasons, and I think that's why we've really gone for this in the heart of the town centre, and you know, that's the plan.
Excellent, Simon. Thanks for that. And I'm sure, as you said, we will sort of bring forward the detail around this, and what may go into it specifically. I know you talked a lot about council services, a combination of new retail, food and drink, but as you say, it's combining this notion, isn't it, that you want people using the town centre, you want people spending time there, and when they spend time there, they spend money there as well, and that's how it all collects together, isn't it, and really actually starts to regenerate the centre and bring people in. Clearly we have to make that sustainable and how they get in there and all of that, but it's really all about getting people out and To be honest, I think after the lockdown, maybe people won't need a reason to get out of the house, but we have to look a lot longer than this, don't we? We have to look to the future and make sure that the centre of Radcliffe is a place where people do want to come in and use it and spend time and spend money. And actually complement great things like Radcliffe Market, which I know is very, very popular. And we want to try and offer, other things that keep people in the centre there. Liz, anything more on the Civic Hub that we might need to pick up, or are we happy to move on?
I think, Chair, there was a question about what facilities would be provided at the hub, which I think you have just touched on a little bit there. So I think that's okay. I think we can move on to the next question.
Yeah.
There's been a number of questions pre-submitted and on the live feed, quite a few questions about the proposed leisure provision in Radcliffe, and reference also made to a recent Bury Times article, which I think most of us are probably familiar with. So just to summarise, what leisure facilities will be provided in Radcliffe as part of the regeneration plans? Where will they be located? And will any leisure facilities at the school be open to the public? I think reference has also been made on the live feed, the fact that Radcliffe does have a very low level of fitness across the borough, and so obviously very important to get leisure facilities in there. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so thanks, Liz. So clearly there's that question mark over leisure, and I suppose what we might say actually, when we say the word leisure, what do we actually mean within that? But clearly there's a question mark over the location. Now, Simon, you outlined some options. As you say, that there isn't an absolutely nailed on preferred option. I think at the moment it's fair to say that on the basis of the conversation we've just had, the emphasis will be on what can go in the centre, but clearly that's more of a beginning of a conversation than an end point. So do you want to say anything more about location, and then I might bring Paul back in just to talk about school facilities, and I think it might then we also just talk about the combination, the difference almost between wet and dry leisure and what that means. So
I'll do my best. It's not the straightforward subject, and I think the point I would make to start with is that we want to make it the first thing, the most important thing is we agree, don't we, with most of the comments that say we want a really top class leisure offer in Radcliffe available to all residents. That's point one. And point two is because actually there's not only a demand for it, but somebody said there's a need for it. And okay, well, we can sort of go with that as well. So there's a well-being point to this, as well as a leisure point to this. And it's important that we recognise that this isn't just about providing leisure facilities, it's actually about providing facilities that can help people with their well-being. So that's important. Where should it be? Well, it should be accessible. It should enable people to combine it perhaps with other things as they go about their business in the town centre. And there is the possibility of locating it in the town centre alongside the hub. That is a possibility. We weren't too sure whether or not we could do that. We weren't sure there was enough space. We think there is enough space, certainly, Leader, to include for things like a swimming pool and a gymnasium and those sorts of facilities that you would expect to find in a leisure centre. It would be impossible, and I'll leave this to Paul to touch on, to include things like playing fields and perhaps larger scale badminton courts and the like in the town centre. I don't think that is possible. So there is a question mark over whether or not you put everything in one place, or whether or not you put some things in the town centre and locate some things alongside the school. And then there's a question of whether or not facilities will be available to the public if they're located with the school. I'm sure Paul can touch on that too. So that's the debate. And as we've said before, nobody's made any decisions around this, but we're looking at it to see what's possible and what do people want, what's going to attract them to come in and use the facilities. Because the other bit to this, which we all know, is that if we're providing them, we do need them to be used so that they can pay for themselves. You know, these are that's an important point, and any ratepayer would recognise that issue, and I think we recognise it as well. So that's a couple of points, and Paul, I'll leave to you to touch on the other one.
Okay, thank you for that. I think as Simon said, there are different opportunities there in terms of co-location with school, co-location with the hub. I think the linkage with the school is interesting. There's some synergy there in that within any school that we were developing, we would obviously have to have dedicated facilities for use by the school. But there are then some opportunities to have that synergy with community led facilities as well. But I think the key thing, if it was designed alongside school, is to ensure that they were the key parts of any leisure offer were there and widely available to the public, and therefore weren't ones that were simply available after hours and were therefore primarily only for use by the school. So I think that's a consideration in terms of location and what we provide. That said, within the school, within the design that we would be bringing forward, we would be making provision for certain things to serve the school primarily, but which would nevertheless still be there for wider community use at other times. So, for example, we would have a sports hall, an indoor sports hall. We would have outdoor playing pitches. Potentially there is scope for 3G pitches. Those things we would certainly want to be available for wider community use, notwithstanding whether a dedicated leisure facility was on that site or was part of the town centre hub. So I think there's possibly almost two bites of the cherry here in terms of providing access to sport and recreational provision, because even if the leisure facility was in the hub, close to the hub, we would still be looking to provide facilities to serve the school, but which would nevertheless be available to the wider community. And we would obviously look at how we can enhance what's available there to support that broader community use, given some of the health inequalities. I mean, one of the key strengths of the business case that we presented to government wasn't just about the educational inequalities, it was also about the health inequalities and how the school could support some of those. So I think there's some real opportunities there in terms of what we're looking at on the school side.
Thanks, Paul. I think that's the challenge in all of this, isn't it? Trying to find something that is complementary to all of the needs and demands that we've got going all at once here, when we've not necessarily got the space to do it all in one single place, and then ensuring that people are, that they complement rather than detract from each other, so that people aren't having to sort of choose to, work out in one place, swim in another, go play football in another. We're trying to do it as much as it can be together. And actually, I'd just say as well, it's great to see that Radcliffe FC is getting some additional money from the council to fund a 3G pitch at their facilities, and including things like changing room facilities and improved car parking. And so you can actually see that the actual sporting and kind of leisure offer in Radcliffe, you can see that in a few years' time actually being, top notch and exemplary, because you're getting these new facilities, at the highest possible standards. And so it will attract people to come to places like Radcliffe to say, well, actually, it's one of the best places you can play football. It's got a pool facility that's new and modern, and got all the changing facilities that maybe aren't quite there in the temporary pool at the moment. So I think that will also support this idea of saying, Radcliffe has got these facilities, and that's why people will want to live there, visit there, and use them. So key to get that complementary. Okay, Liz, any further comments or questions so far?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just a change of theme now, pre-submitted question. in relation to the GMSF and the SRF. What is the relationship between the SRF and the GMSF? That's the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Liz. We have Chris Logue on the call, who's been working on both. So I suppose Chris will be the best person to tell us the differences between the two.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Liz, for the question. Basically, the short answer to that is that there is no direct relationship between the SRF and the GMSF. The GMSF, as was, effectively was a statutory development plan. Statutory development plans plan for the long-term housing needs and employment needs, along with a range of other planning policies. You know, from affordable housing through to you know, hot food takeaways and one thing or another. Those are clearly aspects of a statutory development plan that are used to determine planning applications as and when they come in. The SRF itself, obviously, is a regeneration plan, and you know, we've heard from colleagues and the chair tonight, and from Simon about the positive regeneration benefits that the SRF will bring to Radcliffe around housing and the school and the core. Now those are clearly important regeneration benefits. And the SRF itself has been approved by Cabinet back in September as a material planning consideration. So what that means is whenever planning applications come in, the SRF can be used to help determine and shape those applications. The actual process itself of the development plan has to go through obviously quite extensive consultation. It has to then go through an examination in public, and as part of that process, you know, that's going to be 2-3 years down the line. What we will be able to demonstrate, hopefully through the SRF, is that we've developed and brought forward those brownfield sites in and around Radcliffe, and I think some of the sort of questions and conversations this evening is looking at the Sticks paper mill we've heard is materialising, and at School Street are actually on site some of the enabling work. So that's really positive news, and that will feed into the housing supply sort of going forward. But there is no direct relationship between the SRF and the GMSF in the sort of higher levels position. They are completely separate entities. The SRF can be brought forward in its own right without any statutory development plan sitting behind it. Thanks, Liz. Chair.
Thanks for that, Chris. So I think that should give some reassurance to people that we can continue focusing on the delivery of this plan, keep making the progress, keep, you know, certainly we've got the resourcing, as Simon said earlier, to back up these plans, and basically we can keep moving on this, not lose any of the momentum that we've been building, and hopefully start to bring forward the actual plans in place and see things really starting to happen. Okay, Liz, I know we're getting lots of questions coming through, but we've still got a couple pre-submitted ones that we might try and theme together.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, one here about the opportunities that the SRF will bring. What will the SRF do to accommodate for the needs of young adults looking to start a family and get a good job? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, excellent question, and it really sort of speaks to the heart of what we were saying earlier, Simon. I think about this has to be about people and not just about buildings. So there's an ambition in this plan to really try and shape those future opportunities in lots of different ways. So it might be quite a general question that you could probably talk a lot about. So do you want to try and maybe pull a couple of the themes out for us, Simon, about how this really does create those opportunities for, the question said younger people, but really, you know, all people who are interested in coming to Radcliffe or staying in Radcliffe and making a life for themselves there. Simon?
Yeah, I'll just try and be relatively brief on this one. I mean, I think the first thing is to say that Radcliffe is, and clearly has been for many, many years, a popular location to come for people to live, and we need to make sure it continues to be that. New housing will will be aimed towards people who want to come and live in Radcliffe. And as you say, Leader, I'm sure some of those people will be younger people. They don't have to be, but I'm sure they will be. I think another bit to this that isn't easy to articulate, but hopefully you've got the sense of it, is we really want to create more jobs in the town centre. We want to create the opportunity for people to either set up their own business or to get a job in the town centre in a new business that we can help to create. And that's why we talk about market chambers being brought back into use and being possibly a nice place to work, but also the hub. I'm sure we will create workspace in the hub where businesses can come and either co-locate, as we say nowadays, or set up on their own. That's what we're looking for. So there's a real piece to this, which is around local businesses being able to locate here, and I'm sure that must be an opportunity for younger members of the community as well as older ones.
Thanks, Simon. And if I can just add, we've been doing a lot of work on our housing strategy over the past year, and we asked a lot of questions, not just about typical things you might say about a housing strategy, which is number, location, quality, but we wanted to ask people what they felt was important about a place, and a place that they wanted to make their home. And of course, making a home is very different from a house. And what they were saying to us was, it needed to have an offer around jobs, as you say, but it also had to have a great cultural economy. So what are the leisure opportunities? What are the food and drink? Can you go out and shop and get what you need in your town? Schooling was a really important one, especially for younger families. There's a lot of younger families moving out of places like Manchester city centre to start their life in a place like Radcliffe, and clearly affordability was in that as well. And I think what I've took away from this as well is that we are making real progress on all of those fronts. We're making great news about the school, right at the heart of Radcliffe in the coming few years, creating those jobs, new opportunities, introducing affordable housing, and we're giving a real sense and a guarantee around leisure being permanently in Radcliffe, where it always was, but has always been sort of question marked and temporary in the last few years. But with those commitments, I think that is a place we want to be in, because that's what people will be attracted to. So I think that's what's so great about this, is it really does bring all of these issues together in one place. We're not looking at regeneration through a pinhole. We're looking at it in a really wide view. Liz, back to you for any other questions.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, one here again focused on the town centre core area and retail in particular. Why does the SRF propose fewer shops in Radcliffe? Now that will be referring to the focus retail strategy. And another question that's come in on the live feed in relation to that is, how can we encourage more quality retail into the town centre as part of that proposal? I think concern there about the quality of existing retail and so on. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Liz. So Simon, we've got the classic quantity quality debate. So I'll hand to you on this. And obviously, we have to be really conscious, don't we, that the state of what we generally call retail is in a big state of flux, quite honestly, because of COVID. But that we can't underestimate that was an issue before COVID as well. So it's a difficult one here at the moment to say exactly where it's going to land and how it will recover. So how do we get this right in the plan? Are we talking about quantity and quality? Where do we stand? I'll hand it over to you, Simon.
And I think there's I think I saw a further question, Liz, which was around the types of shops that perhaps we see on the high street. This is a really difficult issue, and there wouldn't be a single person who hasn't got a view on what their high street should look like, and there wouldn't be a single person who hasn't seen something written or said about this over not just the last 12 months actually. And I don't want to go on a long speech about this, but this has been coming before COVID. the changes in people's shopping habits has been with it coming for a long time. And actually what COVID has done is accelerate the change. And we have to face up to that. More people do want to shop online now, and they certainly have done during the pandemic. For Radcliffe, it gives us an opportunity to reassess what I would say the ground floor of your town centre should look like. There will be shops. Nobody needs to think for a second that there will not be shops. There will be. People still want shops, and they still want to be able to go to shops. They do want a higher quality offer, and that's why we say let's focus on quality rather than quantity. But that's, you know, that is an easy thing to say. It's not an easy thing to deliver. One thing we are going to do, because the council, I think, will have a little more control of some of the buildings within the town centre, there is a real opportunity to sort of work very, very hard to make sure we get a good mix of facilities and types of use in the ground floor of the town centre. They won't all be shops, but there will be different things to do. And I think the future of the high street is around activity. Future of the high street is around making sure that at the ground floor there's a window and you can see that people are doing things, and they might be working, they might be in a working environment. It won't necessarily be a shop, but it will be alive, it'll be active, it'll still be a place where you can see things going on. And that's what I think we mean, Liz, by a bit more focus. But it's a challenge, and you know, we're going to have to face up to that challenge. Habits have changed, and we can't just sit there and sort of, you know, wring our hands. You have to do something, and that's what we propose to do.
Thanks, Simon. And it will be a difficult challenge because it's difficult. It's a difficult environment, and I think we can take some encouragement actually that in other parts of Bury, we have started to see a bit of that shift become quite successful actually, and we've got quite a unique offer in places like Ramsbottom. We've got a growing independent sector in places like Prestwich and Whitefield, which really are just on the doorstep of Radcliffe. And so there's a sort of a follow-up question in the live bit here about how you sort of genuinely encourage that variety of independent retailers to sort of complement some of the other chains and not just be dominated by the generic. I suppose there's not a simple answer to that, but the benefit of, I suppose, us being interventionist on this and having a bit of control on it does mean that we can influence that more so than we are currently able to do. So do you want to maybe just talk a little bit about?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, you could argue Radcliffe doesn't have many national retailers. There's a few, but there aren't loads. Most of the retail premises are independents already, and I think most of the research that has been published over the last few months suggests that the renaissance of smaller towns will be driven by independent retailers and independent businesses. So we're in a good place in that context. These businesses need a bit of help. They need a bit of help. They need a bit of support. They can't do, as we know, I mean, it's been a terrible, terrible time for smaller businesses, particularly if they're not being able to trade. So they do need some help and support. If they can be given that help and support and they can get through the next 12 to 24 months, then hopefully we can find a way to support those businesses to be the lifeblood. That to me is the future. And you know, the national retailers are not going to be as relevant, I'm afraid. One way or another, they're not. They might be in Bury, but they're not going to be in Radcliffe.
Thanks, Liz. We've got just under 15 minutes. Have we got any more live questions that perhaps we've not managed to throw into this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's quite a few, so we'll try and pick a couple out. Just sticking again with the town centre core, we've had a question about the Blackburn Street Gateway site and asking what proposals are under consideration for that site as part of the SRF. Thank you, Chair.
Probably best back to you, Simon, on this one.
Yeah, it's a great
idea of the thinking at the moment.
Yeah, and I think so. Without being too precise around that, one thing that you could recognise is that if we bring forward the ideas that we've got for the hub, and we can find a good set of uses for the Blackburn Street site, then I think that will transform Blackburn Street itself. And Blackburn Street is home to lots of those independent retailers we were touching on before, and independent businesses, and they will be helped by something at the other end of the street that, you know, generates activity. So we're looking at a mixed use scheme there. I think terminology a bit, you know, mixed use scheme, what does that mean? Well, it will mean something active in the ground floor, might mean some residential above it, some new homes. That's probably the way to go. But there are other ideas, and if people have got ideas, then they should let us know. No firm decisions, but there is a great opportunity to do something there that gets that pedestrian flow moving up and down Blackburn Street, we hope.
Great, and of course at the moment it's a COVID testing site, so we do want to make sure that, as I'm sure it probably will be, that when that is finally finished, and we don't quite know when, we can't quite predict that, that we probably are able to bring something in its place, because what we don't want to see is empty spaces and not really much to fill it, and I think the more work we can do on that to prepare for when it is eventually free, the better. So something to look out for. Liz, anything further?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's been a question about delivery and timetables for projects, and are we able to give any more information about timetable for when at least one of the projects may be delivered? I guess that's possibly linked to funding availability as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Liz. So I think when it comes to delivery, there is always that question mark, and if I can be blunt, things never seem to move as quick as we all like, but I think that's not because things aren't happening. So maybe Simon, and I'm not sure, maybe if actually someone like Dave Lynch or Chris wants to come in on this, it might be helpful to almost outline a little bit of the process, because it can sometimes be a bit like, you know, a duck swimming along, you know, there's activity sort of furiously underneath and a relatively quiet calmness on top, but things are happening. So Simon, do you want to just talk a little bit about that, and then maybe Dave, Chris might want to come in and talk about the kind of nuts and bolts of what we're actually doing and why sometimes it can take a bit of time before we see cranes in the sky and whatnot.
Well, I will let Chris and David have this one, because I think it's important. They are in the engine room, but I mean, just to say that those governance arrangements are in place, and Chris and David are part of that team. So perhaps over to them. Great,
Chris, you want to start, and then we'll bring Dave in after.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I can make a start on this. I suppose the immediate question is, it's actually happening. Maybe stealing David Lynch's thunder here, because he's helping to lead on the delivery of School Street. You know, so there's an application that's got to come in to start the enabling works on the residential element on School Street. So things are actually happening on the ground as we speak, you know, and that's just one of the key projects. I think we've heard from Paul Cook in terms of the successful application we've had from the DFE. You know, so we've outlined the delivery plan for that on September 24. Isn't that far away. There's a lot of work to do between now and there, but we'll expect to see planning applications to come in on that, and sort of start to see some work on that in the foreseeable future. You know, so that's a real target date, which we're looking at there. And I think, Liz, you've alluded to the funding issues. I know the presentation very much highlighted the funding opportunities that are here and now. You know, they've just been announced in the budget. And the important thing to say on that is that the work that we have been doing over the last 12 months has been leading up to this point. We're on a real strong position with the SRF, with the team, with the governance structures, the support from the community, the support from all the political spectrums, the support from the MP. That all puts us in real strong position to access those funds. You know, and obviously accessing those funds will obviously help to accelerate the delivery of those big projects. You know, and we've identified that the core project, you know, whatever that may be, in the Civic Hub, will be crucial to the successful delivery of the SRF. You know, and that will be the catalyst then for all the other spin-offs. So the answer is, you know, each of those projects will have their own individual timeframes, but we're actually starting to deliver on some of those as we speak. So Dave, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Well, probably just to reinforce actually that we're twin tracking the design development of the hub proposals along with the anticipated levelling up bid in the spring. So actually we'll be in a position to publicise more information about the design development of that in due course. And just to reinforce, you know, the aspirations of the SRF do include residential sites. We've mentioned that School Street's on site at the moment with the remediation, drilling, grouting works to bring that site forward. We're also making progress with our partners at Homes England on the East Lancs site, which we'll be in a position to provide a bit more information on soon. And actually, the delivery of these schemes is intrinsically linked to the resources that we have at the council, and part of that's budget, but part of that's also myself being part of a team that we're assembling to shift focus from the council from obviously this aspirational master plan, which is never going to sit on a shelf. It's actually going to be a pathway to bring forward a number of development and investment opportunities across Radcliffe.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Chris. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, you know, Dave, his role at the council has been established to try and make real progress on delivery, but we also do have specific extra resource now. So this, you know, new people working for the council directly on Radcliffe. And I think that's something that has been different from how we've previously done it, where we have talked in terms of quite large scale ideas and we put some funding behind it. We've now got that scale of funding and also the people, which is really the combination of what you need to try and actually kickstart some of this, deliver some of it, and then you start to bring in all of that extra support from the private sector, from those external funders, from the government, from Greater Manchester, from people like Homes England, because they see us actually really committing to this. So I think that should give some reassurance actually that when we talk about delivery and the timescales, you know, you've got to have the people, you've got to have the money, and that's now where we're at. Liz, we've got just over 5 minutes now. Can we take maybe a couple more questions in that time?
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's been 2 or 3 comments and questions about the open space, public space in Radcliffe, particularly asking about signage for visitors and the fact that we are very blessed to have the plaza in Radcliffe, and are the proposals that could become a place or an enhanced space for eating and drinking and so on. So I guess it's a question around the proposals for public realm in the core of Radcliffe. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. I wish we had the weather for a plaza all year round, but we can definitely make use of the space and of course the bandstand and other spaces. And I think there's been a few comments about using even the river and the space around the river. So Simon, do you have any thoughts about this idea of using these existing and quite unique spaces? Because you mentioned things like the river are unique in Radcliffe, and the plaza is also, and the bandstand. You know, we are blessed with these the existing assets. So how do we make the most of them, and what does the plan say about these spaces?
Yeah, again, as you may have detected by now, I'm not from Radcliffe, but I do think you've got the best bit of river in Greater Manchester in Radcliffe. I think that the Irwell, as it runs through Radcliffe, is tremendous. And should be celebrated, as I suspect a lot of people do, but we could do more. I think everybody recognises that. There is a great space in the town centre. I mean, it doesn't always necessarily feel like that, I suspect, but there is a great space there. And you can see, hopefully, from the ideas that we've been talking about tonight, that once we put some nicer things around it, it'll be a great place to be. And yes, I do look forward to that time when we'll be able to enjoy it. So absolutely. But there are the other thing about Radcliffe, and again the SRF does touch on this, is that the green spaces around the town. I think somebody in the questions has mentioned the canal again, a bit of a hidden gem, a bit of an asset that people don't always see, but also those green spaces should all be used as part of making sure people can enjoy all the open spaces around the town. And you know, who cares about the weather? We're used to it, aren't we?
Absolutely. I think that's something we've all got used to by now, and to be honest, it'd be quite nice to be outside just in any weather. I think for all of us at this point, and on the river as well. It's, you know, we can't underestimate the benefit of the £46 million flood defences, which have really benefited Radcliffe and further up into Red Vales. I think we all remember the devastation of the 2015 Boxing Day floods and what that did to many homes in Radcliffe. And you compare it with not a single home flooded when we last had the storms, and not all the flood defences were actually in. So by managing the river in a better way, and those additional resources do help us do that, it does open up huge potential along that river, so that people can feel secure, but then also actually start to use it and invest things, their time, their energy, their money into making the most of it. But would you say, Simon, perhaps a slightly longer term ambition on the river, or are there some short term benefits, medium term? You know?
No, I mean, I think slightly, but you know, as I said, officers are busy talking to the Environment Agency and talking to other stakeholders across Greater Manchester to see what we can get moving as quickly as possible. So, without saying it, it's not years away. It's something that is being advanced as part of the plan. So, you know, it's something that's very much in mind.
Excellent, Simon. Liz, we've put aside 5 minutes to sum up, but I'm going to be sneaky and see if we can get a final question in, and then I'll try and do a sum up in 30 seconds so we can make sure we get as many questions as possible. So final question, I'll give you the pleasure of picking, Liz.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's been 2 or 3 questions on this actually. The fact that we've mentioned a number of groups being involved helping to drive the delivery process forward, but the question really is around residents and how can residents get involved and stay involved. So I guess around engagement and going forward the whole process really, which is quite a good one to finish on, I think. Thank you, Chair.
It is, Liz, actually. It's a fantastic place to finish, because even though we're coming to the end of this, really, actually, this shouldn't be the end of the engagement with residents. And I know from the conversation I've had, the cross-party working groups, the engagement with the Member of Parliament, you know, there is a commitment here to really actually saying we need to get this right, we need to get it delivered, but we need to get it right. And the best way we get it right is by working with local residents, local businesses, local stakeholders, you know, the people who have a stake in the future of Radcliffe. So that's really, really important we continue to do that. Simon mentioned earlier, he outlined the kind of various groups that we've got. Each of those has a sort of distinct role in trying to really deliver and drive this forward. From Sir Howard Bernstein, you know, global leader on things like urban regeneration, you know, amazing work in Manchester, really driving forward the work in the delivery board, which again brings in lots of different partners. It brings in other agencies, people with, let's be honest, tens of millions of pounds that they can bring to the table with the right types of schemes. That work is so crucial to really deliver on this, as the name suggests. We've got the Cabinet Subcommittee, which is again a public meeting. People can watch it, they can send in their questions, they can ask, you know, and really engage with the items for discussion on that. Again, that's cross-party. We're bringing people together around that, and that sends the things through to the final decision-making body at Cabinet. So it's really important that people engage through that process. We've of course got the advisory group, which is really where this all started, and again that's on a cross-party basis. So our thanks go out to everybody who's really engaged with that in a really constructive way. That is, I think, the sort of ground floor of this, where people could share in their thoughts and ideas and really to actually talk to the people they've elected to represent their views. So that's what we want to see. We want to see people really feeding into that, and that almost bubbling up into the final outcomes when they get to things like Cabinet and the delivery board. I think Liz, this is something we will probably keep coming back to in terms of a webinar style series of events. We've got the website as well, where we will put many of the questions that we've not got to, and we will reiterate some of the key points actually from tonight for those who've not been able to make it. But I think what I've took away from this, and what I hope residents out there watching have took away, is very different from how we've approached things in the past, where we've effectively had, very nice looking things and an aspiration, a kind of hopefulness that things will happen. We've transitioned now from that to saying we've got all of that still, but here is how we go about doing it. Here are the people who are going to do it. Here's the money that's going to help start to do it. And I think that should give people a confidence that we will deliver on this. We still have to have conversations and decisions on some of the specifics, but we will do that with people, not to them, and we will make sure that we engage them properly. And so on that note, Liz, I'm going to draw things to a close. We've hit the half-hour mark. Let me just say a big thank you again to everybody who is watching, who've engaged with this, who've asked the questions, who've read the documents, who've challenged us constructively about some of these issues. We really do appreciate that support, that buy-in, and that challenge. Big thank you to Simon, of course, for the work he's been leading on, and the whole team of people who've been leading on this. Especially a big thanks to Paul tonight for the update on the school. That's been really crucial. To Chris and Dave, who are working on the delivery side and the strategic side, getting this over the line in many different ways. Huge thank you to Karen, our head of comms, who has been a bit behind the scenes on this, but has really driven this forward and pushed things like the leaflet and the engagement all around this. And then, of course, finally to Liz, who's pulled it all together tonight in a really helpful way, brought in as many of those questions and really helped us get into the detail of this plan. And on that basis, I will close. So thank you again for your time, and we look forward to seeing more exciting plans in future. And hopefully at the next one of these, we'll be talking about even more things that are completed or in progress, and people will have a real sense of confidence that this is starting to move. Thank you all.